Mountaineering mistakes causing terrifying moments on Mount Everest. The astonishing height of 29,032 feet is reached by Mount Everest. It is the highest peak in the world as well as the highest graveyard. The courageous mountaineers who take on the task of climbing Everest do so with the full knowledge that the icy crags of the peak could very well be their ultimate resting place. On the treacherous crags and slopes of the mountain, it is speculated that hundreds of dead remains have been laid to rest. So why do so many people keep attempting to climb Everest? How many more bodies are there to be found? The risks associated with ascending Mount Everest are widely known in the mountaineering community. There is a section of the mountain that is figuratively referred to as the Zone of Death, and its victims have attained newfound notoriety on a global scale, being known by epithets such as Sleeping Beauty and Green Boots. However, not everybody is put off from climbing Everest by its difficulties. The number of tourists and large groups climbing the mountain is only expected to increase in the coming years. Why have the bodies of the dead been left on Everest? It comes as a shock to many people who are not aware of the death toll on Mount Everest to learn that the majority of the deceased bodies will remain there permanently. However, there are perfectly rational explanations for why the remains were left where they were. Because of the perils of climbing Everest, recovering a deceased climber's body can be incredibly challenging and time-consuming, and it can even be impossible at times. It's not possible to use a helicopter to collect bodies that have fallen higher than Camp 2's elevation of 21,000 feet. Instead, in order to retrieve the dead, they will need to be hauled down the mountain. It needs a team of rescue workers or Sherpas who are capable of excavating frozen bodies and carrying the additional weight of a frozen corpse down the mountain in order to successfully remove a body. The expenses associated with such an adventure can easily exceed $70,000. Few bodies are ever brought down from Everest, since doing so is extremely expensive and perilous for the retrieval team. In addition, many mountaineers have the custom, which originated with sailors who become shipwrecked, that they want their bodies to remain on the mountain if they die there. On Mount Everest, the bodies of deceased mountain climbers are used as guideposts. On Everest, a practice that is as gruesome as it is useful is developed, in which the bodies of deceased mountain climbers are used as guideposts on the trail up to the top. Although the bodies represent the completion of a journey for mountaineers of days gone by, they serve as a reliable marker for climbers of today who are attempting to reach the elusive peak. A great number of the bodies have not been positively identified. Nonetheless, several of Everest victims, such as Green Boots and Sleeping Beauty, are well known and have become the mountain's most renowned permanent residents. Sewang Paljoor, an Indian mountaineer, started his climb of Everest in the year 1996. It was certain that he would never come back from the journey. Paljoor's body was hidden away for some time in a cave that was located on the path leading up to the peak. His green boots, which he wore throughout the journey, allowed his body to be identified by everyone who came across it. At the request of Sewang Paljoor's family, the Chinese authorities exhumed his body in 2014 and entombed it beneath snow and rock. This took place on the main trail. Everest was conquered by the husband and wife team of Francis and Sergei Arsentiev in the year 1988. Francis was the first woman from the United States to try climbing without the assistance of oxygen. Although she and her husband made it to the top of the mountain, they did not continue on to the descent. During the journey down to Camp 6, Francis fell, separated from her spouse. When Sergei went back to hunt for her, he learned from a group of Uzbek mountaineers that they had located Francis and tried to assist her, but she was unable to continue her journey. Francis's body became a landmark that came to be known as Sleeping Beauty. She is currently resting with an American flag draped over her and a teddy bear that was given to her by another adventurer named Ian Woodall. The body of her husband was not located for an additional year after her passing away. It appeared that Sergei had tumbled down the mountain. The life and death of mountain climber Rob Hall was dramatized in the feature film Everest, which was released in 2015. He was a legendary figure in the sport of climbing throughout the world. The Seven Summits Challenge was successfully accomplished by both him and his good buddy Gary Ball, who together scaled the 7 highest mountains on the planet. The tragedy that occurred on Everest in 1996 put an end to Hall's days of exploring. In the beginning of May, Hall was the leader of an ascent party up the mountain. Due to a string of unlucky circumstances, the group ended up being stranded on Everest during one of the mountain's devastating snowstorms. Rob and Doug Hansen, another participant on their trip, both passed away as a result of the storm. Other mountaineers on other excursions also made it through the storm while they were climbing. Scott Fisher, an experienced mountaineer, was another person who was killed by the storm in 1996. Fisher, who was climbing up with his Mountain Madness group, was successful in reaching the peak during their trip. On the other hand, he started showing signs of wariness. When the storm hit, Fisher sent his expedition crew on ahead of him, thinking that he would be able to slow them down. Unfortunately, he did not survive the storm and then lost his life. Mount Everest is almost inextricably linked to George Mallory's name. The majority of people agree that he was the first person to explore Everest. Mallory accomplished a successful ascent of the mountain on 2 separate occasions. The trips resulted in the creation of a number of maps and trails, but Mallory was unable to reach the peak. In spite of this, he went back to the mountain in 1924 with the intention of reaching the peak. Leaving Camp 4 on June 8th was the last time anyone saw him alive. The remains of Mallory were not found by anyone until an expedition in 1999 came upon them. It was not known whether or not he ever made it to the top. Before he passed away, Mallory pursued a life of mountaineering and adventure. David Sharp made an attempt to scale the mountain in the year 2006. It is believed that he was successful in reaching the peak during a solo effort. However, there is still no resolution to a problem. Sharp would never come back to narrate his tale again. His body was discovered next to Green Boots in a small cave, which is believed to have been the location where Sharp had stopped to rest or seek refuge. He died frozen in place. Hannelore Schmatz passed away on Everest as a result of her exhaustion. She started out the ascent with her husband Gerhard, but eventually the two of them went their separate ways to finish the adventure. Her group was able to reach the peak, and after a grueling journey through challenging weather conditions, they eventually made their way back down. Together with another mountaineer named Ray Gannett, Hannelore descended to a sheltered area to rest. The night was too much for Gannett, and he passed away. After continuing the descent for some time, Hannelore eventually passed out from tiredness. She passed just a mere 328 feet away from Camp 4. There was an attempt to rescue her body in 1984, but it was unsuccessful. Schmatz's remains are now lost on the mountain due to the accumulation of snow and time. One of the 12 mountaineers who perished on Everest in 2012 was a woman named Shreya Shah Chlorfine. Since the tragedy occurred on the mountain in 1996, it was one of the bloodiest years the mountain has seen. Shreya was able to reach the peak of the mountain, but she lingered there for too long, causing her to use up more oxygen than necessary while she took pictures of the view. Shreya struggled with tiredness as they made their way back down the mountain. She died at an altitude of 26,246 feet. Her body, which was covered in a Canadian flag, stayed on the mountain for some time after she died. Later on, her body was brought back to base camp after it had been removed from the mountain. And that's all for today's video, but we hope you found it helpful. If you did, please make sure you hit the subscribe button for more videos from us, and thanks for watching.